New venue. Hello again. I now am going to have the honor to introduce our moderator, who will introduce our panel, and this is Sean Graham of Carmen Line and Executive Advisor to to the U.S. Space Force Historical Foundation. But before I get there, I do want to introduce another special guest we have with us, Representative Jimmy Petronas. Hey,
Jimmy!
All right, so I got to admit, two things I learned today. One, I had no idea the Florida House had that type of view. Who's ever seen it for the first time today?
It's pretty awesome.
That's the best view in town. And actually, the AC works up here.
Yeah.
This place has horrible AC. You know, we need to make some investments from Florida up here to get this thing a little better energy efficiency. So, and downstairs, it's usually kind of like a sauna, but it feels great up here.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank y'all all for coming and showing up, but more importantly, thank y'all for your time to be able to give back some. I'm a new guy. Mike and I were Herodopoulos were elected in the freshman class last year. I think we're having a blast. I am, at least. But Mike's keeping busy. His wife is now the acting Surgeon General, so she is signing every document that the actual Surgeon General cannot sign. So, I think he thought he was going to come up here and be the center of attention, but really Stephanie's the one who is stealing all the oxygen out of the room. So anyway, thank y'all, Robert. Great to see y'all. Thank y'all so much. I'm going to be in the back of the room. If I sneak out, because I'm going to go preside, they need me.
Well, thank you very much, Robert, and good evening, everyone. And
There's some seats up here. You guys
Come
can
on,
come
come on
sit
to the
down.
front.
Tons of seats. You don't have to stand up.
We won't bite. Maybe I will. All right, thank you, Ray. We got a volunteer.
Thank you.
It's like church, you're late, so you're sitting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so this is the Church of Space this year. And we feel very honored that Florida House has chosen to partner with the U.S. Space Force Historical Foundation to turn this into not only Florida House, but Florida Space House for our nation's 250th anniversary. And as we look to the past of what we've accomplished, this venue not only provides a place for us all to share in that history, but really think and imagine what comes next. And that's the theme for today's panel, as we look to the Artemis generation to build not only America's, but the world's future in space, on Earth, and off-world. I'm Sean Graham. As Robert mentioned, I'm the Executive Advisor to the Space Force Historical Foundation and also the founder and CEO of Carmen Line. And 57 years ago, last night, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. That journey began in Florida. There's a lot of work that went in from across the states to build the machinery, but the launch still happened in Florida. And to this day, every human that is launched from the United States has flown from Florida. And despite the fact that our national space programs now have these new commercial partners that are expanding our spaceports and operations across the United States, for the foreseeable future, the Artemis program, America's space launch programs that take us to the moon and beyond, will be launching from the coast. And so 15 weeks ago, we got to see an example of that. Artemis 2 took our astronauts further than humans had ever been before. And once again, we now look to what comes next. And I think that's a bit of the theme for today. So I just wanted to introduce some of our wonderful guests. Brian Hughes, our new director of the Kennedy Space Center, where he leads operations not only for the busiest spaceport on Earth, but it's also a responsibility that expands from Kennedy to here in Waltz, Virginia, where new commercial partners and programs are taking off. And it previously served not only as National Chief of Staff, but also senior roles in the White House. Right next to him is Dr. Christyl Johnson, who also has an illustrious career, 35 years spanning in NASA, and has now left the government side to come into the private side to be standing up your own Andromeda Ventures. And so we're excited to dig into that to see how you see the complementary relationship between private capital and our U.S. programs. And on the left, last but not least, Mr. Mike Miller, who is Vice President of External Affairs and Workforce Integration at Space Florida, our state's aerospace and finance development authority. He was also a former member of the Florida House, and with 3 decades of public service, both from Capitol Hill and Tallahassee, advocating for space on both capitals. So, with that background, I'd love to just kind of start off at the top. 57 years ago, after Apollo, 57 years after Apollo, and weeks after now Artemis 2. What did the Apollo mission change? If we look at how Apollo impacted our space programs and what we're doing through Artemis today, let's start with the past. What was the big shift when Apollo happened, when we first took on that mission to go to the moon? Start with you.
Jeez, small topic. First, thanks. Happy to be here with y'all. So on June 19th this year, I turned 57. So
Young.
I was a month old, and I grew up with my family syncing those two events together. That it was presented that in my lifetime I would see incredible things because this incredible thing happened right after I was born. So obviously the Apollo missions were a culmination of, by that time, many years, many taxpayer dollars, and many very smart people all working together in a different environment, somewhat in the world than there is today. We had a different kind of Cold War, but it was obviously all set off by a vision statement from President Kennedy. So what it represented was what America should and often has represented, which is we're a nation that can just take an incredible, hard to imagine idea and make it happen in front of people's eyes. So the actual event, I think, it brought the world together. It showed America's dominance in the burgeoning space exploration world. It showed that our nation deserved the leadership role that it had in the world, and it inspired so many people around the world. So that was what that mission did. It's what NASA was founded on. I tell people every day at work when I have an opportunity that I'm not aware of any other federal agency that was created and founded on the notion that there's a thing we don't have any idea how we'll do it, but we expect you to figure it out and go do it. And we did. So I think it was a moment for our nation, and of course it set in motion just an incredible multi-generation adventure for our nation.
So I would say that it has actually changed the quality of life for all of us here today. I come from the engineering side of the house, all the way from designing and building laser systems to electro-optical controls and to being our deputy chief engineer, so many other things within NASA. There were thousands of technologies that were developed as a part of that Artemis program. And so many of those were transferred to private industry to commercialize and improve the quality of life for all of us. It really opened up our minds and the environment. Did any of you see the movie Hidden Figures? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Hidden Figures is really the way that we developed and how we created an environment for innovation to do the impossible, to create things that have never existed before. I'm one of NASA's modern figures, and so as a part of that, I also grew up at Langley, just like those women did. And so with that being the case, we really were trained that it's not about sitting at your desk for 8 hours and coming up with an innovative idea. They taught us, like for me at Langley, I designed and built laser systems, so we'd be in the laboratory working, we'd get to a place where you're bumping your head up against a concept, you can't make it work, we'd jump in our cars and we'd go to the mall. And we'd eat ice cream, people watching, until somebody came up with an idea and we'd run back to the lab. We had one coworker that had a sailboat. We'd go out on the sailboat with our laptops and our bathing suits, and we were working. But when you actually come up out of that water from taking a break, and you're in a place where you are totally outside of the norm, we had so many innovations. My team had so many inventions that happened because NASA said, we are paying you to innovate. We want you to think outside the box. And so at NASA, we've had a year where we had over 1,000 innovations in 1 year. That is the kind of innovation that happens when you have an impossible mission and an impossible vision. And Apollo took us there. Not just in our country, but the whole global community came together to do something that was totally impossible. And that's gotten us thinking in a very different way that will continue, and people were sparked again with this Artemis mission. People all over the world were excited seeing these people now take this journey together. And what you're gonna see these next 10 years from the innovations that are gonna come from that are gonna blow your mind, truly. And I'm gonna be a part of that.
Well, you're going to invest in that.
Yes, I am. Yes,
Which
I
is a
am.
part of the American dream.
Yes.
So,
yes.
so as the Florida guy, I think it's really interesting to talk about Apollo and talk about the fact. I'm looking at the wall. I have the unique vision of being able to go back to the history of it all. And thank you, Robert, for putting this together. It's really a great evening. The idea that we weren't one of the original 13 colonies, so we were actually part of the frontier back when the country first started, and then we became the place where we went to the next frontier, right? And we're doing that. So I think there's an interesting conversation. It's what makes the American spirit so wonderful, is that we have this opportunity, and Florida is the best place in the world to launch a rocket, so we got first dibs. But that's not always going to be the case, right? And but in the spirit of what you asked about Apollo, I think that's where we are. We are in an inflection point. It was great to see Jimmy here tonight, Congressman Petronas, because the Florida delegation, Christyl, and what she's doing now and going into the private sector, and then Brian with his new opportunity here. We are the next generation of the frontier of what we're going to invest in as an American country and culture, and what we want to do and how we want to get this going. It's happening right now, and it's super cool. And I think for Space Florida, which is what I represent, Space Florida right now, we are trying to support what Brian's doing. I'm so happy he's at the Cape now. And I love the idea that you're going to go take all that NASA experience and you're going to invest in companies that can go figure out how to solve some of those problems, and how we get to Mars, and how we can live in one of the most difficult environments we can possibly think of. So it's just a super exciting time. And we're talking about it at the Florida House, which is pretty cool. So,
And as we move into the art, and this really is about bringing the world together through space. The same weapons of destruction that we created during the ICBM era were never deployed for war, but they were redeployed for exploration. And that's how we got Alan Shepard up. That's how we got John Webb. That's how we got the earliest Mercury, Gemini, Apollo programs. And NASA was actually born on the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station.
which was a proving ground. Which was a proving ground.
It's a proving ground.
Yes.
And as we look now to the Artemis generation, our next iteration, this is commercial companies, this is global partners that are participating, that have signed onto Artemis Accords. Where do you think are the differences that between what we tried in the past and how we want to operate today?
Well, the difference is if you start an innovative mission in technology, because we're Americans and we approach things this way, you have the opportunity to hand it off to become a business model and become something that can fuel an economic engine. So Apollo and all the other things we talked about launched us to this place where we have private innovators that grew up seeing it, thinking about it, dreaming about it, and they took their incredible intellect, their ambition, and their money, and started figuring out how to turn a business, turn it into a business. So where we are now is a whole element of space is caught up to a business model. We have multiple people building rockets. We have those rockets launching all the time. There was a launch from the Cape just before we started this. In fact, it's almost passé now when you're at the Cape that you see a rocket launch.
Sometimes your office shakes and you don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, there was a launch. Yeah, I'm not quite happy. So as that innovation continues and has real commercial applications, what's coming behind it is another generation of inspired people. Artemis, going back to the moon, going beyond the moon, there is a whole crop of innovators that is about to emerge with ideas to turn, how are we going to build a lunar economy? How are we going to continue to expand the economy in low Earth orbit? So I'm an American, so I believe, as many Americans do, that open markets in the marketplace can solve a lot of the tensions that lead to war and conflict. Make no mistake about it, NASA is a civilian agency, and we have friends and partners that work with Department of War on the national security implications of space. And there is a national security implication. It's the high ground. If you're a fan of Star Wars, as I am, you know how important the high ground is. So just ask Darth. So we have to always remember there is a national security implication. But if you look at what NASA does as a civilian agency with the Artemis Accords and the idea that we try to bring nations with us in this adventure, we've been doing that now for decades. The international components in the shuttle program, and throughout all phases of the station. We have the opportunity to expand an economic marketplace and the world that I think ultimately will serve our national security by protecting us from the ones that come back.
And kind of speaking to that, Christyl, or Dr. Johnson.
You know, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fine.
You spent many years in government and now moved to the private side. And this is a perfect example of these type of partnerships. And beyond flags and footprints, because we are going back to stay, what does returning to the moon actually buy the American public as far as science, technology, and commerce?
So I said part of that in the first thing that I said in terms of technologies and really improving the quality of life and advancing technologies in so many different ways. But the difference that I see between the Apollo program and today is today the budget, so first of all, technology is moving much faster than it was. AI is being incorporated into everything, from the way we run our businesses, the way we run the business of NASA, to the way that we design and build our missions, to the way we launch them and operate them on orbit, etc. And then bringing the data back down is one thing. But when it comes to this technology development, if we are not able to do this in partnership with others, and I'll just say also, the most important difference is now we don't have the funding that we need to move as fast as we need to move. It is a national security imperative for us to be able to do what this administration says we need to do, move fast to go to the moon and beyond. That is for a reason. And so with that being the case, the only way that we're going to be able to move as fast as we need to be able to move is if we marry the public money that we've got with private capital. There's so much private capital out there. And if we can focus, if we can help focus and bring that together and leverage resources, not just with the space ecosystem, but those tangential markets. If you have multiple markets that care about your product, you can leverage the resources, you can move much faster, and you can make much more rapid advancement in your technologies. So this time gives us a real opportunity to bring more people to the table, more innovation to the table, and more people who care about those innovations to the table to help.
Typically, lunar economy, just as an anecdote, we see, talking about national security, we see around the world a competition for critical minerals. Like, as we develop technology, we've unleashed the need for all kinds of things we didn't used to need, and there's limited amounts of them on Earth. There's plenty of science already that there's lots and lots of them out in space in a lot of different capacities. So, it's a part of science fiction where you see space mining, but there are companies operating today that are exploring, and I try to talk, because I'm not an engineer, I play one in my office. So I try to talk not in technological terms. The dust on the moon traps gas. One of those gases is helium. If you work with helium supplies in the United States, you know that there are issues with the helium supply chain. And there are companies today that are exploring the possibility of robotic gas capture on the moon's surface that would yield helium and other gases, and that's just the surface. So if we're going to be multiplanetary, it can't all be on taxpayers' dimes.
Yeah.
And things like going to the moon to stay are not just about being on the moon forever. It's about proving the concepts that we're going to need to be multiplanetary. We're going to have to live long periods of time in very harsh environments. So our next lunar adventure is built around that. How do we go and stay? How do we build, how do we develop and launch and land the tools that we need to stay? And then how do those tools translate to an economic vision?
And no, Brian, one of the things I was most excited about when Brian was appointed to the position and then meeting Christyl just a few minutes ago is that this is the conversation now. The conversation is not how do we get these things solved by government programs, but how do we combine the monies, the limited monies we have with private innovation. And then what Brian's saying is, if there's a profit motive out there, let's go make it happen. I mean, helium's the smallest molecule. I'm not an engineer either, but it's very hard to store, right? Because it's got a unique disposition. All of that can be solved by people that are actually in it to make money. So I just feel like, for the I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I mean that's what makes America great. I mean, we are a country that solves things, right? And so if you have an administrator or director or center director like Brian, and you have innovative people who have life's experience like Christyl, and then you have a state like Florida, which is really trying to motivate people to do what we just talked about, be creative and figure out a way to solve these challenges. That's what makes the space industry so cool, because that's where the innovation comes. That's the forefront of all the things I talked about in my last comments about Frontier. There's also a huge profit motive to being in the Frontier. Those guys didn't run out to California. The 49ers were not named after a soap company. They were out there to make gold, right? So I mean that's a big deal, and we're doing that now. Like Brian just said, if we can get to a place where we're doing that on the moon, and then even dealing with asteroids and other opportunities in space, that's a great opportunity for America.
Absolutely.
And we're a country of innovators, and there's a vision without resources is just illusion, right? Or hallucination. And the idea we need those resources to do it. We need physical resources. There's great resource competition going on globally. There is an abundant amount of resources in space, and there were attempts at creating asteroid mining companies in the past, but that was before we really had the launch vehicles. Deep space industries, planetary resources, they had technology that was viable. There was just no way to get there. But now we're living in an age where Cape Canaveral has had 109 launches last year, on trajectory to hit 500 launches. Our infrastructure wasn't really built for that. If we want to achieve the missions and our goals that we're setting out, what needs to happen in order for us to get there?
Now you're going to make Brian really unhappy.
I'm going to be happy.
It's a big challenge.
There's no doubt about it. The Cape was developed for a different space industry program, and the infrastructure is challenged. But the beauty of strategic planning is a lot of important legwork has been done at Kennedy to continue to stay in front of the curve, which we have. The 109 launches happened because we've made investments along the way. But we are rapidly approaching a time where the commercialization could outpace government. So how do we do that? We have to work hand in glove with them. The types of things that Space Florida can do as a I always say quasi-governmental state agency is they can recruit and offer relationships around the center. There's some legislation that could potentially give NASA a footing that's more akin to the Department of War, which allows a little bit more commercial and private dollars to be applied to infrastructure, and that's the model. I mean, most of the major airports in the United States were military fields, commercialized. Then the commercial outpaced the need of federal bureaucracies for them, and the industries and local, state, and federal partnerships developed kind of what we've come to know when we fly through Atlanta or Orlando or JFK. They are partnerships of a private industry that went off, developed all kinds of technology to get us to places, and they partner with government agencies and federal regulators to create the safe place to do that travel. So the model's there. I mean, it's existed for years. we're at that transition time now, and that's what's exciting to be at Kennedy. There's certainly needs that we have. Those needs, if they relied on the federal taxpayer loan, the pace could get off here in the near future. But the beauty is we don't have to have as much concern about that because of what's emerging with the commercial sector.
If I could, I think it's really, thank you, Brian, because I think, you know what, I'm joking around about being unhappy. It is a challenge, right? But it's a challenge that you just articulated very well, that the launch cadence and all the things that have to go. You know, we want to go and talk about all those great things in space, but you got to get off the ground, right? So you have to have the roads, the bridges, the wastewater, the LNG, all the things that, you know, those are challenges. But I appreciate the comment that, you know, Space Florida is here. We were created by Florida statute to do exactly what Brian just said. We were trying to support what is, you know, the greatest American endeavor of all, and that going to the stars. And so when we get into those conversations, sometimes it's a little weedy, right? You're talking about how to deal with a wastewater plant or a liquid natural gas situation. But those things are what we at the state level would love to support the federal level to ultimately get, be it Artemis or be it a private launch service provider, the opportunity to get to space. So that's where we are. I think the state of Florida is really taking it. You know, Brian has a really great relationship with our office, and we work hand in glove to try to figure out how, and Space Force, by the way. That's the other. You know, we also have our federal partners that we all want the same thing. That's how do we increase the cadence and do it in a safe manner, and then have those successes and work.
One of the things I want to foot stomp to what he said, and I'm so thankful that you guys are focused the way that you are, and all of you all in the Florida ecosystem, because you can't just have this in any state. The reason that Florida is the state that's doing this is because you have the infrastructure, you have the ecosystem, which is really, really important. Having universities like UCF, which is a space,
You're wearing their colors tonight.
Oh, there you go. But really being able to build the pipeline for the next generation, the ecosystem there with the companies that are around, the airport that you all now have this amazing international airport, so many different things that support that infrastructure. And at the research park at UCF, having all of the Department of Defense entities in the research park, including now Andromeda, being there to really support those, the incubator companies and the ecosystem, the infrastructure. That's why I wanted to be in Florida, because of the amazing infrastructure that you all have. So kudos to you guys for that.
And speaking of that, there's an aspect of resiliency to this.
Yeah.
Right? There's private investment, there's state mandates, federal mandates that are happening, these public-private partnerships. But there's a great example of something that I think highlights our ability to bounce back. About 8 weeks ago, a rocket exploded on the pad at Cape Canaveral during a test. And within days, the state approved a new expansion funding for the same company. What does it say about how Florida treats these setbacks and how we can learn from that elsewhere?
It's the example of the state and federal government working together and working with the commercial partners for success. Space is hard, things like that happen. But as you know, we had 2 launches within 24 hours after the anomaly. So there's a partnership between NASA and Space Force that allows flexibility at the Cape. There's the state agency or group that wants to see Florida remain in the premier position it's in, and there are commercial partners that like launching where we live. So it's just the response to it, I think, is a great example of these partnerships we're talking about.
Couldn't have said it better.
Well, thinking about the public-private partnerships, Christyl, you spent 35 years inside NASA, and now you sit on the other side of the table writing the checks. What really makes a public partnership actually work, and where does the government still have to lead?
Government still has to set the requirements. They have to set the prioritization. For me, not all venture companies are focused the way that I am, but because of my experience inside NASA, knowing where the priorities are, not just on the civil side, but on the defense side as well, if they set the priorities, if they set the requirements, then it's easy for me to be able to go out and rally the troops on the outside, getting family offices, getting endowment funds, getting all kinds of different opportunities, pooling those resources together to then go focus it in those priority areas. And so the government is still a really important part of this, because I am not going to just do it on my own. I'm going to follow the lead of those prioritizations.
I'll put a plug on that and along the same line for my boss. It takes, for NASA, speaking directly to what you said, NASA has to be very clear about where it's intending to go and how it intends to get there. So when she's talking about requirements, there needs to be a clear, consistent vision to industry, because industry moves fast and it needs lots of capital to do the work. And capital doesn't move unless they can have the highest degree of certainty that anyone can have working in the space industry. So the way that plays out is you need a generational leader for the agency, and we happen to have one now who he has business success in his background. He has a lot different portfolio or resume than many of his predecessors, and he has a vision that's not just for his term. He has the ability, and he's inspiring so much positive change in NASA that I believe he's setting a course that will go for decades, regardless of whether he's there or not. And the most important outcome from that multi-year change is going to be much greater clarity for the private sector, particularly the investment class, the investor class.
I would say, because one of the worst things that you can do is to send a signal out to private industry that this is where we're going, and then a year or two later, you say, never mind, we're not going to do that, and we're canceling this program, or we're doing, because people are definitely moving money around, and it makes investors very hesitant to use their private personal money to invest in these things if they really don't have a clear signal. So what he said, I'm foot stomping that like 10 times. It's so important.
And as we get the federal mandates, sends the demand signal to where we should be going. The state agency of Space Florida was created to help de-risk this and attract folks. There's different states to choose from. If I want to set up my space company, it's Texas, Alabama, Virginia. What really helps to win the deal, so to say, to bring people out to a state like Florida? And what are the tools that Space Florida provides to them?
Well, I could go many directions there. You teed me up. Like, did you read our statute? Because I can go all the different directions. But I guess the most important thing is we have great federal partners, both on the Space Force side and on the NASA side. And then we also have this entity that was built. The shuttle had 135 launches in 20 years, right? And we were terrified as Floridians that we weren't going to have another. We had all these brilliant engineers and all this workforce. What was going to happen next? So the statute was created 20 years ago this year, 2006, and so that statute is trying to support the efforts that Brian's doing at the Cape, support the Space Force, and also the interesting thing is we're statewide. So we try to help aerospace companies that want to come to Florida, because you can build things in Tampa or Pensacola or whatever, and also we call ourselves Space Florida, but we're really Aerospace Florida. So if you're a helicopter company or a Aspire, we have advanced air mobility, we have all these next generation technologies coming. We support that as well. And so the state of Florida has done I think a really good job, and in particular I want to foot stomp because I like that term. One of the things that we think is very important is the workforce. One of the things that, and I see Tubby nodding his head at UCF, and we have the number one higher education system in Florida, but we also have 2.4 million school-age kids in Florida. And wouldn't it be exciting to have those kids be inspired to work in the space industry and to come up with the next generation of whatever that thing is to solve it and make money, right? So there's a great opportunity at Space Florida, and I've been really excited to see the high schools around the state of Florida that are looking to figure out, does Joey or Susie need to go to college, or do they want to work in space? And mom and dad might say, pretty good idea. Maybe you should go work in space. I see Greg Autry nodding. There's a lot of opportunity in the space industry, and we do compete with Texas and Alabama and Virginia and these other states. But that's what the founding fathers wanted us to do. They wanted us to compete. They wanted us to figure out how we can bring the talent to the state, and we're doing that. We're doing that with the workforce. We're doing that with a low tax environment and all the other things that make Florida the great state of Florida.
I think ultimately the competitiveness or competition of states is going to fade away. Again, for me, it's the airport model. At some point, there are limitations because of trajectories and the science of space that not every state's necessarily going to have what it takes to have a spaceport. But a lot more will than they do today. And there's a day in our future where there's lots of business for everybody. But what's grown in organically around some key places in Texas and Florida are these models of what it can be for many others. I know this is me. Don't be mad at me. I also wear a Virginia hat now because of Wallops. But the reason we're looking at Wallops differently now than we did is along the lines of what I'm saying. That we have a moment that's coming where there could be enough heavy launches and enough other launches in the medium range that are happening at Kennedy that you would have the need for additional capacity outside of the Cape. And we have this moment now, Wallops, to make sure that that's fully developed for a lot more orbital launch than it's ever seen. But ultimately that's going to happen in a lot of other places. So the key is, build on your strengths, and the beauty for Florida is our strength was demonstrated at the very birth of the space program. We're there for a reason. We lead. We're the launch center of excellence is the new terminology for NASA KSC. And launch is always going to be there, but it's also going to evolve in other places. But states that don't see that coming or don't think about ways to do that will certainly fall far behind us in Texas and others.
And that's a good point, because there's 14 licensed U.S. spaceports today. Maybe 2.5 of them are launching on a regular basis. Cape Canaveral, Vandenberg, Wallops behind it. We've only had really one active mid-band launch company, that was Blue Origin doing the New Shepard in Central Texas. We obviously have new Spaceport America in New Mexico, where a lot of this is overlapping between government and military and commercial, excuse me. And this term dual use is used a lot. And a lot of our policy is based upon that. Things that were authorized in the Big Beautiful Bill was in regards to spaceport bonds, things that are being funded through non-dilutive financing mechanisms. And I'm curious, I'll take this one to you as someone that's now set up a venture fund to invest predominantly in dual-use technology. The line is continually being blurred between what's civil, commercial, and national security space. What does that mean for policymakers in this room and some that sound on both sides?
I think it's important for them to understand that the way they have envisioned space before, or just defense before, you can no longer view it that way. Almost every technology that we are developing for space has applications elsewhere. And so when you think of dual use, even for like our investments, in order for humans to thrive off planet, you've got to make medical investments today. Medical devices are going to be absolutely necessary. You think about even mental health. Thinking about mental health, when you have some people living on another planet and they're not able to come back and forth, they're not able to talk to their family as often as they wish, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's part of the reason why the astronaut training program gets those specific individuals. But if we're going to develop a base where you're going to have not just the astronauts that are expert at this, we have to think about all those things. How do you develop clean drinking water in large mass? How do you make sure that you can develop food in very constrained environments? The kinds of things that we use for launch vehicles, etc., missiles are going to be the same type of thing. Energy, nuclear energy, thinking about fuel sources. The new fuel sources for nuclear are also the same radioactive isotopes that you use for cancer treatment. So those radioactive isotopes can go in and treat that cancer cell without even touching the healthy cells around it. So if you have people on the medical side investing in those medical technologies, while we in space or we in nuclear are thinking about nuclear energy, That's where this whole symbiotic play comes in, getting those communities to come together, push the technology faster, and then you can use it for both applications.
I like to think about infrastructure, innovation, and inspiration.
Yeah.
Kind of the three pillars of space for me. One of the biggest ROIs in space isn't just the return on investment, I think it's the return on inspiration. Think about all the kids that have been inspired by the Star Treks and the Apollo missions in the past. Someone that spends a lot of time on workforce. The Space Coast alone grew 8 or 9%. The Space Force workforce on the Space Coast grew 8 or 9% from 2017 to 2023. Where does the next combination class of 10,000 workers come from? And how can we...
Well, previous to Brian taking the position, NASA did a study. They said they're going to be 1 million worker shortfall by 2030. So, and again, I want to just go back real quick. You know, that space bond thing you talked about. There's no question that everybody in the state of Florida wants the rising tide to raise all boats. One of the we worked very hard with that, and Senator Moody and Marker, when he was in the Senate, worked on that bill. That was a Florida-driven thing to make everything better for people that want to invest, make it more like airports. The seaports and airports have been invested in by private capital for generations now. Spaceport was not contemplated. So I think Brian is right that eventually that competition will be less intense, if you will, because everybody will be creating these environments where they can do launch or other things related to space. On the workforce side, I think, I'll ask you guys right now, would you rather take math or space math? Or space math. I'm telling you, if you can get kids and their parents and guidance counselors and the folks that are you know right in the education field right now to realize that space is not just for engineers or for folks that you know have a physics brain or whatever. You know, there's a young man here with a physics guy. I know yeah, physics is good, but if you don't have that, there's still a lot of skills in the space industry that are welding, wire harnessing, HVAC, all the things that happen here on terra firma. Those conversations need to be had right now. And so we're doing that in the state of Florida. We're talking to the 67 school districts. We're talking to lots of superintendents who are inspiring kids to say, you know, I would take space math and I would potentially have a job in space, and then I can, you know, maybe defer college or maybe get that industry that I'm working for to pay for my college. So I think to answer the question about how do you get there, it's inspiration. It's what Artemis did. I mean, everybody was gobsmacked by Artemis. I mean, it was a World Cup in 30 seconds, right? It was everybody just went, oh my gosh, look at that. If you know, as NASA continues to push the envelope and get back to the moon and beyond, that's going to inspire the generation. And if the states do that, fill in the gap behind that, and inspire young people and make it realize that it's attainable. That's the thing. It's not out there. It's right here. You can work in the space industry.
Feel, but it is.
Yeah.
So I mean, all of these types of things, it's just education. It's really getting it out there. It's storytelling.
I was in the plant research facility last week with 40-something interns at KSC, and we had a taste testing of microgreens,
Oh my goodness.
which are grown in a facility that's meant to simulate a space station. So there is a generation already inspired. I think KSC's secondary mission is iconic. It's meant, the number of people you meet in NASA who have some visceral experience at either Johnson or Kennedy as a kid is quite substantial. It's my story. I visited in 1973 as a 3-year-old, first trip to Florida, and that and Star Wars a few years after created the perfect storm that led NASA.
And here you are. Look at you.
So, but I think there's a real. It's a great point that the science, tech, engineering component is definitely the need right now. But ultimately, there are so many fields that are going to develop around the future of space that's exciting. And I think that's starting to appeal to young people.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to kind of my closing question before we open up for some Q&A. When the Artemis generation looks back at this decade, what do you each think, what do you want Florida or the U.S. to have gotten right?
Well, for Florida, it's just that we did it again. We demonstrated why Florida will forever be attached to space, both in our history and in our future. So for Florida, that's what I think. For beyond, it's just it's the Artemis program is another demonstration of what makes America special, and what makes America special over the course of our history makes the world better. I believe that to my core. It's why I'm back in government. It's why I enjoy every day that I work at NASA. I believe in our country. I believe in what it stands for, and NASA is an embodiment of all of the promise that America has. So it's Artemis is the next step in that amazing American journey.
So that was perfectly said. I will just say ditto to that. But at the same time, when I think about America,
Yeah.
what I want to be able to say is we got it right in terms of public-private partnerships. I want to be able to say we came together as a nation to make it happen. There's no way we are going to win this space race if we don't change our approach, if we don't work more closely with the public sector and the private sector. We just don't have enough money to do it if we don't. And there's tons of money for us to tap into. We just have to funnel it to the right places. So that's what I want to be able to say we succeeded in.
I mean, again, I think for me, coming up with the, very articulate Brian, perfect distillation of the fact that it has to be private sector.
Yeah.
And then, the United States of America, we collectively as states, and I would think that Florida should lead the way. I'm just saying, Florida is the place where, we should be doing this, and we can inspire other states, we can inspire other countries. One of the things we haven't talked about tonight is all the international relationships that Florida has fostered, and Brian hosts folks every day. I host folks every day from Canada, from the European Space Agency. Actually, most of my office right now is in Farm Bureau, which is a big air show in London, and the governor's there right now. I mean, it's a huge international opportunity, and I would love all those international companies to come to Florida and launch from Cape Canaveral. So I think there's such an inspirational thing. Workforce, the world, the next generation of investors. It should happen in Florida. That's the bottom line for me.
Well, I want to open up to the audience for any questions.
Hi, my name's Randy. I come from Brevard County, Florida. NASA's our hometown team. I'm represented by Congressman Herodopoulos, who did our video message earlier. He's a leader in science and space and technology, and I work in agriculture, so thank you for that.
Oh,
The shout out to agriculture. My question for the panel is, not all of us live in a district where our member of Congress represents the Space Coast. So much of the math in Washington requires bipartisan consensus. So what do you think is the conversation that either isn't happening loud enough or isn't happening at all to get more bipartisan buy-in so that we can have continued investment in the Space Coast in Florida?
I got the NASA KSC job just under 3 months ago, and I had a round robin on the Hill just a week ago with members of both parties, members from out of state that have interest in what Kennedy does and why it's there. So, space should be bipartisan. It should be nonpartisan. It's so important to the future of the nation that I think it's common ground. There's always going to be parochial competition because of the nature of our democracy, representative democracy, but across Florida, even representatives that are farthest from the Space Coast, I think they take interest and have pride in the fact of what it means to the state, and I'm trying to make sure that they feel that every time I talk to them. Does that answer the question?
Well, look, Jimmy Vitrona showed up. He's in Pensacola. You can't get much further from him. but he has a lot of space industry in his. The state of Florida has a lot of space and aerospace industry, top to bottom. And there's a wonderful group, IHMC, in Pensacola, that does a lot of work with robotics and next generation. The things that probably are going to be doing a lot of things on the moon and beyond, because we might need robots to figure out how to settle. So there's a lot of interesting innovation all over the state of Florida. And so every member of our delegation really needs to be engaged. I mean, Mike's a great representative, and he's a subcommittee chair, and I think he'll be. We just lost Bill Posey, who was another great American Floridian who was a champion of NASA. But I think Florida has well, we just have to get our whole delegation to feel that way. And Ashley Moody's been that way. She's been great. She's been at the Cape a few times. Brian just hosted her last week. So our delegation is getting more engaged in what space is and what it could be for the state and for the country. So you just got to keep doing that. You got to keep talking about it.
There's also a political calculation that I made, which is because we have term limits in the state government, there are members of the state legislature that are going to be on to new things within 8 years. So I'm trying to spend more time with our state legislators because that's where the next round of other elected is going to come. So attachment. I mean, Florida should, I think it is, and it definitely should be proud of the role it's played in this amazing era.
You back?
Hey, Mike French, thank you so much for this discussion. Really great. Thanks for the ecosystem you talked about. It was amazing so much. Question for Brian. In the role of having KSC and as well as Wallops, is there something about the magic of the Cape and KSC and its ability to operate that you see that is sort of quickly applicable to Wallops?
Yeah, I mean,
or is it unique to? Is there something unique about how the Cape's able to get done?
Well, just on a very specific level, all the elements of expertise of launch are at Kennedy. So the LSP program LSP is there. It's all of our hands-on tech is related to launch and infrastructure is there. So I love my friends at Goddard, but they had a different approach to Wallops, and I think they predominantly focused on the SMD components of Wallops, and they essentially went to the state of Virginia and found a way to kind of outsource the commercial movement that's been cultivating in Wallops. So I had a great meeting a few weeks ago with General French, and I just think Virginia Space see the value add of the attachment to Kennedy, and there's a lot of rapid expertise that's going to come to bear at Wallops. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think there's a lot to learn, right? So
Yeah.
it's great that you're finding things that can transfer.
Plus,
It's fantastic.
on a personal level, I don't know what the Cape was like in the 60s, but I think when I go to Wallops, it feels like that because I marvel at the fact of how close you can drive to a launch pad on Wallops
Yeah.
and how accessible and kind of underpopulated it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Kennedy's still very spread out, but it's got now this large community around it where Wallops is just kind of like, you're driving through the eastern shore, and all of a sudden, there's Noah's giant radar, and then, oh yeah, there's launch pads over there on the island. Very, very organic.
Hello, my name is Melinda Terry. I'm a non-technical aviation youth mentoring program. Very big fan of CT education, getting kids into pilot and astronaut training. I'm curious, what is your message to the other states on CT education? You guys seem to be getting this really right in Florida. I've been down there many times and seen all your great work from Kennedy Space Center, to schools in Norfolk County. But what's your I've just come back from Pearl Harbor, actually, Aviation Museum, doing some work out there, and it's very different to what you guys have in Florida. So I'm curious, what are your main takeaways, your main messages that you could spread to other states that don't have your infrastructure to help and support them, to get it on a more kind of like national and global platform that would be more equality for kids to access?
It's an interesting question. I think Mike would say, don't do it. He wants Florida. He wants Florida to it goes to what I was saying before. I think we're right on the cusp of just a massive. It's already happened in some ways, but it's still just the beginning of this paradigm shift where space accessibility and commerce is turning really fast.
Yes.
So the idea that if you're an education policymaker, or if you're any of the people in charge of other states right now, I would hope my message to them would be, I hope you're paying attention, because if you don't make a move to catch up, you're not going to need to have a launch facility in your state to be a part of what's right around the corner. So, but yeah, again,
Yeah, no,
Florida doesn't want.
We don't want to give it up, but we don't. But I appreciate that. But I also, because it's true, we would love to have everybody here. But at the same time, we realize that even if everybody in Florida decided to work in the aerospace industry, eventually that's going to be exhausted. You know, we're going to run out of the workers. So the idea that the CTE trainings that are going on in the other states, we have actually talked a lot to the other states about, and actually the Office of STEM Engagement through NASA has kind of morphed into more of a, hey, we need to talk about the workforce side, not just necessarily inspiring kids to take STEM education, but what are those credentials and skilled technical labor things that need to be actually proliferated across the states. So that is happening. And I do feel like it may, and it's going to be just what Brian said. Like right now in your 401k, there are no space industry companies. Maybe somebody might be a SpaceX or two floating in there now, but really there's not. But that's going to change. This is an investable world now, and all those companies are going to want to invest in workers, and they're going to want to have this whole workforce is going to expand exponentially. So I think the other states are noticing. I appreciate Brian saying, because we are leading the way in many respects, but I do feel like the CTE, the world of career and technical education, now has an inspiration space.
Any last ones? Well, one last fun one. What can Washington do right over the next 18 months to make sure America gets the
That's all, Brian.
That's not a simple one, because that's a potential minefield. Well, first, let me say, as the administrator does, in tough fiscal times when the American taxpayers are burdened, we appreciate NASA, appreciates every penny we get. The president's budget reflects the money we need to do the core business, and we're grateful that Congress, occasionally adds to that. So we appreciate Washington on the fiscal side. I would say this: most important. I sound like a broken record in my own head. The most important thing Washington is going to do in the next several years is stay the flip out of the way. Like, do not over-regulate the commercial aspect. Don't try. There is definitely a role for government. There's definitely a regulatory environment that's going to have to grow up as industry grows up. But if it gets too ahead of it, we will. Adversarial nations are not living under the regulatory constraints that some people talk about American space companies supposedly needing to work under. And it would be a catastrophic mistake for our nation, for Washington to overthink this at this moment in the process.
And I'm going to take that even a step further. I think that Washington really, really needs to remain consistent about the priority, about the fact that we have a national imperative to make sure that we win this space race. Really important. I cannot tell you. I mean, all the 35 years that I've had at NASA, and for me leading the technology in multiple areas across the agency in engineering, I can't tell you how important it is for us to not give anybody else dominion in space, even for a week. It is absolutely critical. So if we are going to win, then Washington has to put aside anything else and say, no matter what it is, we are going to do this right here. We're going to make sure that we have access to space. We're going to make sure that these kinds of technologies that are going to be critical for us to win there, whether they are defense focused, whether they're civil focused or otherwise, those are things that we together across the board. That's the reason I said this administration. And when I say this administration, I don't mean just the White House. I mean Congress, Senate, everybody has worked together right now to get us to this place, to get us the budgets that we need to do what we're doing today. We have to be consistent in going in that direction in order for our country to survive. And so that is what I think we need to do for Washington to contribute.
In America's 250th anniversary year, 57 years after Apollo 11, the road back to the moon still runs through Florida. And every American who has ever gone to space left Earth from the Sunshine State, and the three people on this stage are working to keep that true as we go back to stay. So please thank our panel. thank Florida House for having us, and for this remarkable year of Florida's Legacy Launch. Please join us downstairs for the reception and for the